Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. I'm OK Savage. I make art and music and I write things, and it's all usually a bit spooky and or weird. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made some weird little tentacle monsters. Now, for context, this was not a commission, but a request from one of my nearest and dearest, who he was hosting a D&D game, and he wanted some eldritch tentacles that would be really, really big, but that's really, really big in D&D miniature size, so actually tiny to sculpt, covered in eyeballs and mouths, and look like they're breaking up through the ground. So, yeah, just a small request. No, but honestly, I was more than happy to do that, because that's right up my alley. It's weird, it's creepy, there's eyeballs, I love eyeballs, tentacles, I love anything with tentacles. Octopuses are my jam. So yeah, I was very happy to do this for him. I've made a lot of miniature things, but not specifically for D&D, so this was, I'd made him like a few bits of scenery for it as well, but aside from that, not really done anything for a specific game as opposed to just for the sake of making art. It was a really fun project actually, trying to get them how he'd kind of described it. So what I've done is I recorded the process of me making them, and I've got that as a video on my handy dandy device here, and we're going to watch it together, and I'm going to tell you what's going on in it. So without further ado, here we go. So I started off making these out of foil. I was going to use like clay and a wire armature, and then I realised I could get a very solid base just by sculpting them out of tin foil, and it would be cheaper and faster, and I would also get a really textured surface, which would save me a lot of work sculpting kind of meticulous detail on later. Then what I'm doing to make sure that it doesn't just look like foil is I've got this PVA. It's very thick, so I'm watering it down a little bit, but I do want to keep it quite thick for this purpose, because what I'm doing is I'm painting it over the top. So I wanted a very textured surface, and I didn't want to have to sculpt this all by hand, so the tin foil kind of does it for you in that it goes all crinkly and weird, and then I've just made that less dramatic by going over it with layers and layers of PVA and building up, a bit like if you were doing, you know, like paper crafts. And then I'm just using just some scrap cardboard to make the bases out of. I always have scrap cardboard laying about, partly for me, partly because I have a kid. We all use the scrap cardboard. So yeah, I'm doubling up the thickness of those though, just so they're not floppy and bendy, because I'm going to be putting stuff on the bases, you know. And you can see I'm doing more layers on the tentacles. It looks very blobby at the moment, but as that dries, it's going to dry. It's going to sort of tighten up into the creases and folds, and it's going to need more layers. I didn't even record all of the layers that I ended up painting onto it with the PVA. It wasn't a lot of work per se, it was just a lot of time in that I had to keep going back and forth to it. So it's less hours in terms of actually working on it, but more hours in terms of waiting for layers to dry before putting on. And then I am going in with the Milliput, which is the sort of clay that I wanted to use for this. It's like a epoxy, I don't know if that's the right word, I can't remember the word for it. Basically, there's two parts to it, and you have to mix them together. When they're mixed together, it makes a sort of clay that it dries in, like, you've got like 2 to 3 hours to work on it. So it's quite forgiving, which is nice. And you don't have to, you know, bake it or anything, which is really, really nice, because my oven is not very good. So yeah, I'm going in, and this is where I'm making the first creepy mouth, because he wanted mouths and eyeballs. I'm using a pin here to help with shaping. I do have some little sculpting tools, but I find for really small pieces, just like a sewing pin is such an amazing tool, because you've got the sharp end on one side that's really nice for poking stuff and making holes, getting tiny details and everything, and then you've got the ball on the other end of the pin, and you can use that for smoothing, for making larger indentations. It's weirdly enough, a sewing pin is such a multi-purpose tool when it comes to doing any sort of small sculptures. And you can see I'm really going in there, trying to fill up the indentation that I've got with the milliput, so that the texturing that I want from the foil on the rest of it doesn't extend to the mouth, because obviously, like, inside the mouth it should be a lot smoother. It should look, you know, like you're looking into the insides of this horrendous creature. And going in, adding some really fine detail, like little spiky teeth in there, which came out really good. Actually, I'm really happy with the creepy teeth. There it is. Look at that. It's fantastic, if I do say so myself. I was really pleased with how the mouth came out. And you can see I'm using the pin, like I said, to make some holes, so I put the sharp bit in and then just swivel it round to open the hole out, and then I'm putting the eyeballs into the holes. And the reason I make a hole and then put the eyeball in is I actually learned that technique from, weirdly, watching a lot of videos about doll making as a kid, and I don't know why I was obsessed with it, but I was for a little while. And I saw them doing it on that, and I saw that it just gave nicer results than just sticking, you know, like a half sphere onto something. You get that little bit of depth around it, just looks more realistic, like an eye in a socket, you know. I'd say a good thing with miniatures is when you can make something in the way that it is actually made, it's going to look better, if that makes any sort of sense at all. This one's got a mouth. They've all got a little mouth. Two of them have open mouths, and one of them has a sort of closed mouth that's drooling, which you can't see yet, but I'll point it out when it comes up. And for the open mouths, I wanted these kind of big, horrible tongues coming out, because he wanted it to look very creepy and gross and eldritch, and I thought, if you've got mouths for that, A, they want teeth, lots of teeth, B, wants a big horrible tongue. You can't get much sort of creepier and than that. Then once those are done, I'm going through, I'm spraying them with just some black primer, just really simple black primer. Pick it up at any hobby shop, you know. I did do multiple coats on them though, because when you're working with foil, it does have a horrible, I found this out doing the scenery for him beforehand actually, the foil has a horrible tendency to not want anything to stick to it, which I guess is what it's designed for in the kitchen, so that makes sense. But yeah, you have to do a couple of coats of primer if you're working with foil. Then, what I've just shown you in that jar there, that is not gravel, that is cat litter. Because I didn't have any tiny gravel, but I did have cat litter, and I'm cheap. So yeah, I'm putting some PVA on there, and then just layering up the cat litter on the base. This is because he wanted the tentacles to look like they were bursting up through the ground. And so I thought, what better way to show that than to have this sort of rocky ground that's clearly, you know, like coming away in lots of little fragments around the tentacles. Like, and also, it's just always good to find something to decorate a base with if you're doing a miniature, because I think, like, even though I've not worked on many miniatures, I've spent a lot of time looking at other people's, and what I've noticed is the ones with more kind of dynamic, interesting bases do stand out. They do make the subject, as it were, feel more real. And yeah, just layering up with more glue, more cat litter, and then just to get that really stuck in place, what I'm doing here is I've got a tin of matte varnish. Now this stuff is very, very sticky. Obviously it's designed to kind of protect, you know, paintings and woodwork and everything, but it's also great as a kind of glue almost. And then once that's on and once that's dried, spraying it with black over the top of the cat litter so that I've got a nice base to paint on. And that's when I can start the painting, because we've got all the sculptural elements done, which is very exciting. And so with the painting, the first thing I do that you can see is I'm going into little cracks and corners that the black didn't properly reach because it's such a textured model, and just making sure that the black is really in those crevices, because that is where it wants to be. I'm painting light over dark, so I want the dark in my shadows, otherwise, you know, that it kind of defeats the point of it. And then what I'm doing is I'm lightening up some of the areas that are going to have paler colours going over them, just to make life a little bit easier for myself, because they're going to take so many layers that it's just a good idea to kind of go over them every layer you do. Dry brushing the rocks at the bottom with just a slightly paler colour. It's kind of a grey with a little bit of purple mixed in that I've mixed together. I wanted a sort of heathery kind of look to it, like that little bit of purple, just to make it a bit sort of eldritch and magical looking, but not too much that it looks kind of poppy, you know what I mean? And doing a similar thing with the tentacles themselves, going over dry brushing. The reason I'm dry brushing, as opposed to doing like any thick wet coats, is that I want that black in the creases to remain untouched, because that's going to be my shadows. And yeah, they've come out a very sort of blue colour, which I'm happy with. And then I'm going in and again lightening up the areas that want to be lighter. So obviously the first thing to do with that is the teeth, because they want to be really bright and like the eyeballs and everything, but also going over like lips and tongues and everything, because yeah, you can see now I'm getting some colour onto them. Just having them a bit lighter than the rest of it really helps that colour to pop. It's hard to see there. I think the lighting wasn't great, but they are a little bit lighter, and that's what's helping the colour to pop. Although, if I'd have lightened them further, I wouldn't have had to do as many layers as you do see me have to do in this, which is something to bear in mind. And I'm going through and I'm doing it on all of them. They're all getting the same colour palette and everything, because they're all part of the same big creature that's popping these horrible limbs up. And again, going over, you know, dry brushing it more sparsely, this time with a paler blue, to kind of get some mid-tone shadows from my dark blue, some dark shadows from where the black is left in the creases, and then my highlights where you've got the paler one dry brushed over the top. Going through, lightening things up again, which you're going to see me do again and again and again. It's just a thing when you're painting light over dark. You do have to layer it up, unless you've got really good paints, but I don't, so, you know. Going through and dry brushing the rocks again, because I realised they didn't have quite as much depth as I wanted. So, you know, doing those highlights by dry brushing the pale colour over the top really gives it a bit more depth, makes it pop, which is what I like in things. And yeah, going over layering my colours up again on the mouth. A lot of, when I paint personally, I like to just layer things until they look right. And yeah, I don't know if you saw that, but that was the horrible line of drool coming out of the closed mouth, which I think looks really grim. And that is actually going to have a bit of colour to it, but at the moment it's just sort of pale, because that's where I'm going to put the colour onto afterwards. That's me sort of preparing the area, as it were. Yeah, so I'm going in with the colour on that now, and it's a horrible mixture of sort of pale yellows and greens. It looks very sickly. And going in, making the eyes yellow. I thought that looked a lot spookier and more magical than being white. Sort of like some sort of horrible creature, you know, like almost dragonish. That's as well, that's helped along by the fact that I've gone through and given them these sort of slit pupils, just to really add to that impression that like this creature is about as far from anything you're used to as a kind of humanoid person as it could be. And yeah, I do add a little bit more pale dry brushing to the tops of the tentacles as well, with a sort of pink tone in it, just to really add a little bit of contrast against the blue. And there you go, that's them pre-varnishing, but with the paint jobs done. And you see what I mean about where the black is left? It makes these really nice deep shadows. Like, this is why I love working dark to light when I'm working on something 3D, because it just does half the work for you. You know what I mean? Then going over, protecting my paint job with some matte varnish, and then once I've done that, I go through with some chalk to add these sort of chalky pink highlights to the rocks, which I think makes them look a lot more rocky. I mean, chalk, it is a rock, so that makes sense, you know what I mean? And yeah, going in with some gloss over, not over the whole model, just over the eyes and the mouths, just to get that really like wet look to them. And I very much blobbed the gloss on over the eyeballs and let it dry as blobs to give that kind of impression that they had like a lens over them. And I think that really works. If you want to know what I'm using, I just use like a clear nail varnish for things like that. And then this is them on top of the scenery that I made for him for the same campaign as well. And this is them done. I sort of hid them amongst the scenery to get these shots. I thought it was very cute. Yeah, look how gross the drool is on that one. We're going up the steps of this bit of scenery. All the scenery is made out of like bits and bobs of rubbish as well, which was really fun to do. But yeah, I am really, really pleased with how these came out. And most of all, the person I made them for is really pleased with how they came out. So that's the main thing when you're doing something for someone else, isn't it? So yeah, I just wanted to share this with you so that you could see the process. If you were interested in making something similar, maybe you could try and do your own version, or you know, if you have made something similar or used any of the same techniques, let me know what you think about it down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, and before you go, remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel if you really enjoyed it, and if you really, really, really enjoyed it, I do have a Patreon page where if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not subscribed to my Patreon, you could have seen this last week if you had have been. So, yeah. Again, yeah, thanks, take care, see you next time.